This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV. It's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
You are tuned in to the Foul Weather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
The good old days are now. In this episode, we dissect why there is no better time to be alive as a hunter, and particularly a duck hunter, than right now. We brought wood ducks back from the brink, and the daily bag limit's now 3. Once extirpated from much of their range, wild turkeys now exist in every state with healthy, huntable populations in most areas. White-tailed deer, once an animal that we would let kids out of school to go see because they were so rare? Well, white-tailed deer hunting has become a time-honored tradition. The North American Waterfowl Management Plan is an eloquent model for waterfowl and wetlands conservation and used as a model by conservation groups nationwide and beyond. The North American Wetlands Conservation Act has restored and conserved millions of acres. I could go on and on. My good friend, before he passed, Dr. Dave Ankney, always said the good old days are now, and he was right. Do we have our challenges? Certainly. But we don't win those battles by infighting and spreading misinformation. We win those conservation battles by working together, pulling for the ducks, duck habitat, and in my opinion, above all, pulling for all the great people across duck country. All that in your duck migration forecast for the coming week. Hey, thanks everybody for listening, and remember to share, like, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, and Instagram. Take a second also to rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as share the Foul Weather Podcast with friends. Remember, you know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they're at. We're really thankful for our every week listeners. You folks know who you are. Those that never miss a single migration forecast episode each Monday morning. Y'all are as ate up as me about ducks, duck biology, and duck migration. Our dedicated weekly listeners can pick the best days to hunt because the Foul Weather Podcast forecasts fresh ducks hot from the north. Shoot the ducks from the north before they know where they're at. Remember that we are also the only science-based duck migration forecast available. Brought to you by hunters, for hunters. I'm your host, Dr. Mike, coming to you from the home office in Jack's Reef. Well, it was a week, my friends. My wife missed a deer on the last day of rifle season at 10 yards. I think it was a branch. That was last Sunday night. The Bills lost to the Rams on the same night, which also made me miserable. But then my wife bagged a nice fat doe last Friday night with the muzzleloader. Whew, so there can be peace at the farm now. Well, maybe the Bills still need to win the Super Bowl, but that's another topic altogether. It was honestly kind of a miserable week. In all her years, my wife had never missed a deer. One shot and deer down every single time. So it's a lot for her to unpack, and she didn't even hit it. We're pretty sure it ricocheted off a branch. It was right near last light, so no injured deer, but a first for her. So earlier in the season, she also had a really nice 8-point buck walk right by her while she was working for Ducks Unlimited on her phone in the tree stand. By the time she noticed, this buck had moved out of the shooting lane, and it was all just too late. And so there's a lot of misery there, too, so I guess lessons learned this year. But the muzzle loader that I bought from my wife's brother-in-law in Mississippi many moons ago has still never missed a deer. So venison hanging in the barn once again, and we'll process, that after leaving it hang to season for several days. Good old family fun, and we still do the old school Reynolds freezer, that white freezer paper wrap, because it seems to really keep stuff from freezer burning so much better than those vacuum seals. Jaeger and I, or Baby Jaeger as a lot of our listeners know her as, she's that little 48-pound pocket lab that we have. We hunted the thaw in rains near the farm. It was pretty awesome. Fields flooded and ducks responded by coming off the Finger Lakes, reshuffling, and finding their way into our bag. We really got into black ducks and mallards that we have around right now. We were actually able to bag our 2 black ducks every single day over 4 days of hunting. Shot a pile of greenheads, not a single hen, which was nice, and a pair of teal out of a pack of 4 that flew by. And then there was a pheasant cackling off in the distance, and as we left the marsh, I was able to pick up a bonus cock pheasant. So pretty cool. Three limits, and one day that was a little bit slower. But what was really cool is I was also able to hunt for the first time with a new friend and client I'm consulting for. Mike, it was a great hunt, and you've got me into this new saying. We didn't get a lot of time to talk about it because birds were flying a lot. But Mike had this saying, "It's about to get weird," which I think he seemed to use when like big bunches of ducks look like they might actually work into the spread. Well, it never did get weird, and we only shot singles and doubles for the most part. But it was a great kind of midday hunt with a great guy. So thanks, Mike. We'll have to do it again soon. In our part of the world, the early ducks have really left. You know, some pintails, some green wings, some widgeon around, but much less common now than the big ducks. We locked back up again with temps in the teens on Friday and Saturday and into Sunday. And so goes the weather whiplash this year that we predicted. More of that on the forecast below. So a great week in Jack's Reef Country, and freezers are looking good for the coming year now. All right, pre-orders are open for the Foul Weather Podcast hoodies, hats, and stickers, so get you some. Find them on foulweather.co and click on Shop in the upper right corner. But do remember, we are not Amazon, so these are pre-orders, and when we get enough of them, we'll finish up and ship. So thanks for your patience, my friends. Just like our quality forecast we produce, we went with high-quality Carhartt Rain Defender hoodies. I call these forever hoodies. That is, you won't ever need another one. They are weather ready. We also have great Carhartt hats with the Foul Weather logo and sticker packs for your trucks and gear to show your support of the Foul Weather Podcast. So thanks for your orders, my friends. Keep them coming. And the news you've been waiting for. If you entered your name into the Listener Appreciation Foul Weather Podcast sweepstakes, this week's winner of a Sitka Dakota hoodie in size small or medium is Joel Wilhite. That's Wilhite of North Central Missouri. Joel, I sent you a friend request from my personal Facebook account. So if you're listening or folks know Joel, have him look us up so we can PM him to get an address so we can mail out his great prize. Remember, if you're not familiar with this, we are doing a Listener Appreciation Foul Weather Podcast sweepstakes for 5 weeks. In addition to the Foul Weather Podcast, the sweepstakes is sponsored by the Farmland Group and Wildlife Strategies. The rules are simple. Now, with 3 weeks left in the sweepstakes, we will be giving away 3 more prizes. Once the week 3 post with the item is up on our Instagram and Facebook page, you need to tag a friend and tell us where you are from and the general area you tend to hunt. We're not trying to spot steal. Something like White River or Great Lakes or Montana is just fine. Everyone that tags someone and adds this information will be entered into the sweepstakes. If the tagged people want to be entered, all they need to do is also tag a friend. Each Sunday, we will randomly draw a winner, announce it on the podcast on Monday, and post to our social media outlets. We will then contact the winner by PM to get their address. A note, though, and there's not a lot we can do about this, as I noted with Joel, he's not a follower, so I can't PM him directly right now, so I'm trying my best to reach out to him. You have to be a follower of the Foul Weather Podcast on Facebook or Instagram for us to be able to directly contact you with a private message. Items are going to be really high-quality logo gear each week with Wildlife Strategies and the Foul Weather Podcast logos on them, and we really appreciate our listeners and want to see y'all represent the podcast in the field and diners across Duck Country, USA. This week, our prize will be a wader bag. News to me, but they make bags for your waders so your truck can stay clean. Don't tell the wife because the dog and boot mud in my truck feels like home. Next up, the good old days are now, so please stick with us. Look, folks, the Farmland Group across the Mid-South is your one-stop shop for real estate brokerage, consulting, management, lending, and appraisals. If you own land or you want land, the Farmland Group is where it's at. With over $500 million in farm sales and growing, Gwynn and Shelby Smith have you covered. Look, if you're thinking about buying or selling, contact the Farmland Group to access their full suite of services. If you already own property and want to build equity and value, the Farmland Group gets it done. If you're looking to purchase a new property, well, they get that done too, and they have access to some of the best lending available. Looking to sell? Get it appraised with a Farmland Group affiliated appraiser. But let's be clear for our listenership too. They also offer farm and hunt property management to create places that attract more ducks and more bucks. Who doesn't want that? More ducks and more bucks. Let the Farmland Group build value into your property. Find them today at farmlg.com. That's farmlg.com. You're not going to be disappointed. Contact Shelby Smith today at farmlg.com and let him know that the Foul Weather Podcast sent you their way. All right, and we are back. So with all the doom and gloom out there about declining mallard numbers, pintail populations haven't rebounded, how can we go to 3 pintails? All the talk of habitat loss on the prairies, how can we say the good old days are now? As outdoor enthusiasts in general, let's remember that there was a time that if a deer was even seen in town, they would let kids out of school to go see it. That's right. White-tailed deer that are so common now, we used to let kids out of school, this actually happened, to go see a deer. Now considered overabundant at an estimated continental population of 32 million, white-tailed deer were once only 500,000 strong. That is a 6,300% increase. Wow. Wild turkeys were locally extinct or extirpated from many areas from habitat destruction and overhunting. Reduced to only about 100,000 animals on the continent, they are now estimated at 7 million birds. The wood duck, because we cleared the landscape and used inefficient farming practices. Man, I remember working for a forest products company in Pennsylvania when I was still in the forestry industry, and there was a picture of the hillside when you left the office, and it was just stumps, completely denuded of trees. Half of it had already started to be farmed. It was highly erodible, but we learned from that. So we've conserved places, and we farm where we can farm best. And so we've gotten rid of inefficient farming practices, inefficient forestry practices, right? That really cleared that forest landscape that hurt the wood duck. We shot wood ducks for market hunting, and we also cleared all those cavity-sized trees they needed, right? Wood duck box programs and closed seasons brought them back. This was in some of the original migratory birds treaty stuff, was closed seasons on wood ducks. Now, in most places, we have such impressive wetland forest protection laws that wood duck boxes are not even needed anymore because natural cavities are abundant enough to sustain the breeding population. We've moved the limit from 2 wood ducks to 3 in the daily bag. Such a huge win. Giant Canada goose populations rebounded in my younger years, and I actually cut my waterfowling teeth shooting these local breeding geese in western New York. Brought back from the brink of extinction, the giant Canada goose provides amazing waterfowl opportunities nowadays in a lot of parts of North America. The North American Waterfowl Management Plan started in 1986, and then the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, which is the vehicle of the North American Waterfowl Management Plan. Well, the conservation community came together, and we've been able to sustain waterfowl populations to a greater degree than other birds given the onslaught of habitat changes. This is a testament to the dedication and passion of the waterfowl community, the duck hunting community. To me, hunters have always stepped up to a greater degree than the non-hunter or non-recreationist. This is a huge win and one of the reasons that the good old days are now. You will hear a lot of complaining about wildlife populations, lack of this and lack of that, and certainly access can be an issue. But if you can't find public land to hunt, then you haven't tried hard enough. The North American model of wildlife conservation works, and your dollars generally provide opportunity. It might not be perfect, but public land opportunity in this country is amazing and growing. But let's remember to keep public land public. A little bit of black duck harvest history here. The black duck bag is up to 2 birds per day from sitting at 1 bird per day since the Defenders of Wildlife sued the federal government. They sued the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, right? Maybe folks don't know this, but the antis once sued the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service over harvest regulations and really left us at an unreasonable black duck limit for years. But those lawsuits have been squashed with the application of adaptive harvest management. We invested in our students, our universities, and our science to build population models with little room to argue that harvest was not sustainable. We've extended now beyond adaptive harvest management, or AHM, and have been applying integrated population models to understand drivers of waterfowl populations. And over, we keep finding that it is habitat change and habitat loss and other factors not directly related to harvest that are driving populations. We cleaned up the silly 2 mallard bag in the Atlantic flyway when we finally applied appropriate models to understand the drivers of the population, and now we are back at a 4 mallard bag. My goodness, I hope we don't go back to 2 because it ain't doing anything to save the mallard, so let's yank that out of there. We've advanced our knowledge of pintail population dynamics and will be at a 3-bird pintail bag next year. Hopefully we can clean up the issues with scaup bag limits next and get back our diver hunting culture to some degree that we lost when we went to those overly restrictive limits that have done nothing and will do nothing to recover that population. How does a lot of this happen? How have these changes over time happened? Well, for a while, we had a 40% decrease in university professors with a focus on waterfowl. But now we have endowed waterfowl and wetland programs at Mississippi State University, Stevens Point, Colorado State, Clemson, University of Montana, University of Saskatchewan, and I apologize. I know I missed a bunch of them. I know there are more of them out there. What this means is that we have dedicated researchers working with flyway technical sections and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the hard questions better and faster than ever before. We've now built population models that strongly support that ducks run guns, guns don't run ducks. What's that mean? It means when there's more ducks, you shoot more ducks. But that by shooting ducks, we are not driving the population at the current harvest level. So the likelihood of getting sued by antis is extremely low. So we should not be flippant. We should not take our accusations of the waterfowl science community lightly, and we should remember that we have the best science we've ever had to support sustainable harvest of waterfowl across this continent. And remember that we also have safety nets, or blowout valves, if you may, that can help be more restrictive when actually needed. But again, the 60-day season in 6-duck bag has been sustained because the science says it works. The good old days are now, folks. In 2005, when the mallard population bottomed out, we didn't restrict because a bunch of folks in a smoky room made a knee-jerk reaction because it felt right and they were scared about shooting too many ducks. We kept on shooting them because it was the water on the prairies that made it all matter. And guess what happened? They came back, just like they will after this bottom. And we know so much more now than we ever had. And we have technology and techniques like never before. We track ducks from space. We analyze drainage on the landscape with infrared lensed cameras mounted on satellites. We can pull a feather from a duck and tell you within less than 200 miles where that duck grew that feather as a duckling. We can dissect the mallard genome to understand them better and model their population growth and decline. As an example, the Great Lakes mallard population has been declining for decades. And PhD student, now Dr. Ben Luukkonen, just published his eloquent paper in the Journal of Wildlife Management, noting that the decline was related to loss of CRP acres or conservation acres, and that it was survival during the non-breeding season that was driving the population, not harvest. Just another paper saying the same thing. The evidence files are getting pretty thick on this one nowadays, my friends, across duck country. So what do? The structure is here. The North American Waterfowl Management Plan remains robust, and we as a waterfowl community are identifying needs and getting that information into the Farm Bill so the habitat that ducks, geese, and swans need survives. The sky is not falling. It is the opposite. The good old days are now. Let's work together, stay positive, and do the good work that needs to be done for the ducks. There is nothing that duck people across duck country can't do if they just stick together and focus on what matters. Next up, our exclusive duck migration forecast, so please stick with us. Hold on, folks, don't turn that channel. We've got some really exciting news for you. The Foul Weather Podcast has teamed up with Wildlife Strategies. That's right. I'm now working directly with Ryan Delaney of Wildlife Strategies to build value into your land. Wildlife Strategies is already known for quality wildlife habitat management, be it deer, turkeys, ducks, or whatever you pursue. Ryan knows his stuff. Look, I don't add my name to just any business, but I believe in what Wildlife Strategies is doing for landowners throughout the Southeast U.S. and beyond. If you want science-based solutions to create great wildlife habitat, Wildlife Strategies is your best bet. If you're interested in ducks, when we say, may your skies be filled, well, Wildlife Strategies does just that. They fill your skies with ducks. Contact Ryan Delaney today at ryan@farmlg.com for a site visit. You won't be disappointed you did. Ryan covers the southern tier of states, and I'm available to build habitat management plans across the northern tier. Contact us today for a quote. The Wildlife Strategies team sees your property through from the initial assessment and development of a 3-year time frame management plan through annual check-ins and course corrections as needed. Contact Ryan today at ryan@farmlg.com or DrMike@foulweather.co. You won't be disappointed you did. Fill your skies with ducks and your forests and fields with deer and turkey with Wildlife Strategies. Remember, if you are interested in wetland or other wildlife habitat consulting, to contact me at DrMike@foulweather.co. Our schedule's filling up with contracts from Wisconsin across to New York for the 2025 season. So if you have interest in a site visit, give me a shout. Our services can also be found by going to the foulweather.co page and clicking on the consulting link in the upper right corner. Before we get into this week's migration forecast, though, also remember that our photographer of the year is Matt Mezowitz, and he is the owner of the Wild Look Photography. So go online and check his work out, and think about purchasing something this year for your kids, friends, or family for Christmas. Also, don't forget about Northern Latitude Foods and their wild rice to go with those duck dishes this holiday season. You can get 10% off your order of their amazing wild rice from Idaho with the discount code FOULWEATHER2024. All right, on to this week's duck migration forecast. First, last week we predicted that ducks would decline at the latitude of Iowa and increase in Missouri, and that's kind of exactly what we've seen. Most ducks now at the latitude of Iowa in the Mississippi Flyway are mallards or diving ducks, whereas Missouri has more of a mixed bag of species, and farther south continues to be heavy on the early ducks, but for sure that varies locally, and many folks in the Mid-South have good numbers of mallards right now. We're also still in that weather whiplash mode as we get short bursts of polar vortex stretches that push cold, into the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways in some areas for about a 3 to 5 day period, followed by warm-ups and very often rains. This has created situations of ducks reshuffling and looking for new habitat during and following rains. Over the weekend, areas around Memphis, Tennessee got about an inch of rain, and that same area and into areas farther south are expected to have an on and off thunderstorm event Monday through Wednesday, and then it looks pretty dry all the way through the weekend. The bad news for now is that most of the cold is going to be relatively unimpressive and likely not enough that big ducks have to push south. That is, they're going to be able to sit it out for the foreseeable future, maybe even up through at least Christmas at this time. There will continue to be polar vortex stretches, but nothing like a full polar vortex disturbance that would really sock in the North Country with cold and ice for extended periods that would result in sending mallards south en masse. But on to the detailed forecast. Let's start in the Pacific Flyway this week because in general, other than a few pockets where snow will cover grains and fields, there's very little indication of migration for the coming week. Expect a trickle of pintails, gadwall, widgeon, and green-winged teal this week at best, and that also includes kind of the central flyway. Best bet is early and late in the week for both the Pacific and Central flyways. In the Pacific, light and mixed winds will allow for nighttime migration of ducks, so I'd expect some fresh ducks on Tuesday and then again on Friday. For the Central Flyway and into the Mississippi, there is a midweek south wind on Thursday and Friday that will likely greatly reduce any chances of migration south on those days. That said, late Friday and into the weekend, the WSI predicts a mallard migration out of around Iowa, northern to mid-Illinois and mid-Ohio that should push mallards into the mid-south around the Boot Heel of Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, northern Arkansas, and northern Mississippi. In no way is this a mass exodus of mallards, just a declining number in the north and arrival in those areas that I noted to the south this coming weekend. All the other early dabbling ducks like pintail, gadwall, widgeon, and greenwings are likely to make a reasonable push south out of about the latitude of Memphis for the coming weekend as well. So overall, the WSI predicts a really good chance of fresh ducks in the south for the weekend. For the Atlantic Flyway, the mallard, black duck, and diving ducks kind of remain stalled for the entire week. If anything, the latitude of New York will pick up some additional migrants from Canada, but it's not expected that the mallards and black ducks we have will move out this week, so probably stale ducks overall. For pintails, I'd expect a movement out of the latitude of North Carolina to areas farther south very late in the week, starting on Friday night, but mostly Saturday. All other early migrating ducks will be on the move as well out of mid-latitudes for areas farther south, with the smallest movements by kind of gadwall on Saturday into Sunday and a trickle of most other early migrants throughout the week in the east. Right now, the snow line remains in kind of the Pacific Northwest, obviously down through the mountain ranges, but then a lot of open areas in the intermountain portions. There's a little bit of snow into North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, but most of the snow right now remains in Canada. Great Lakes snow cover is also a thing, and then that progresses across New York, throughout Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. But the real snow that we predicted for the prairies has not hit yet, right? We predicted this for coming in later in the season. The good news is that Saskatchewan and Alberta are staying cold and holding about 10 inches of snow in a lot of places. So a good base that will hopefully see much more snowfall to come to fill those ponds from breeding ducks in 2025. All right, remember the Foul Weather Podcast is not responsible for your bad decisions, so please be safe out there. And don't forget to get on our Instagram and Facebook accounts and register for our Listener Appreciation Sweepstakes. Thanks for listening, and as always, may your skies be filled and shoot straight, my friends.